Marcus slammed the glass door open so hard it cracked against the wall. His 6-month-old daughter was in someone else's arms. Not a nanny. Not a nurse. Not family. His boss, the CEO of the entire company, sat in her wheelchair holding his baby girl, feeding her a bottle like she had every right in the world. "What are you doing?" His voice shook the floor. Victoria Hale didn't flinch. She didn't put the baby down. She looked straight at him and said nothing. But what Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was why her hands weren't shaking. And the truth? It would break him. Comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far this story travels. And if you haven't already, subscribe and hit that bell. You don't want to miss what happens next. Marcus Reed had exactly 11 minutes. That's what the parking meter gave him. 11 minutes to get back inside the building, grab his laptop from his desk, and get out before the night security changed shifts, and he'd have to explain why a senior operations manager was wandering the executive floor at 9:47 on a Tuesday night with baby formula stains on his collar. 11 minutes. He could do it. He unstrapped Ellie from the car seat. She was already half asleep, her tiny mouth working against nothing, like she was still dreaming about her last bottle. He pulled her against his chest, grabbed the diaper bag with his free hand, and locked the car with his elbow. "Okay, baby girl," he whispered. "Quick trip. In and out." He said that a lot these days. Quick trip. In and out. No big deal. He said it at the grocery store when he was buying diapers at midnight. He said it at the pediatrician's office when Ellie's fever hit 102 and he had to leave a board presentation halfway through. He said it every single morning when he dropped her off at a daycare that had canceled on him 3 times in 2 weeks. Quick trip. In and out. Nothing in Marcus Reed's life had been quick or simple in 7 months. Not since Janine died. He pushed through the lobby doors. The security guard, a young guy named Danny, who always worked Tuesday nights, looked up from his phone. "Mr. Reed, forgot something." "Laptop," Marcus said. "Left it on my desk like an idiot." Danny glanced at the baby. "You need me to?" "No, I got her. Thanks." He didn't mean to sound sharp, but something about people offering to hold his daughter made his chest tighten. Every time. Like they were trying to take the one thing he had left. He hit the elevator button. Ellie stirred against his shoulder. He bounced her gently, an automatic rhythm his body had learned in those brutal first weeks after the funeral, the weeks when she screamed from 2 a.m. to 5. And he walked circles around the apartment, because if he sat down he'd fall asleep, and if he fell asleep, nobody would hear her cry. Nobody. That word sat heavy on his tongue every time he thought it. The elevator opened on the 14th floor. Executive level. The lights were dimmed to their overnight setting, casting everything in that blue-gray glow that made the office look like a hospital after hours. Marcus moved fast. Past the conference room where he'd sweated through a presentation that morning, while running on 3 hours of sleep. Past the break room where he'd microwaved the same cup of coffee 4 times because Ellie's daycare kept calling. Past Victoria Hale's corner office, its glass walls dark. And he stopped. Not dark. There was a light on. A desk lamp. The kind Victoria used during late nights when the overhead fluorescence gave her headaches. He didn't think much of it. Victoria practically lived here. Everyone knew that. Since the accident 18 months ago, the one that put her in the wheelchair, she'd been at the office more, not less. Like she was trying to prove something to every board member who whispered behind her back. Marcus kept moving. His desk was 20 steps away, laptop sitting right where he left it next to a framed photo of Janine holding Ellie the day she was born. He grabbed the laptop, shoved it into his bag, and turned to leave. That's when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Tom Griffith, the VP of Logistics, calling at 9:50 at night. That meant something was on fire. Tom. "Marcus, we've got a problem with the Singapore shipment. The Port Authority flagged the whole container. Something about mislabeled documentation. I need..." "Tom, I'm not at my desk. I'm barely in the building. Can this wait until..." "It can't. They're threatening to hold the entire fleet. That's $6.2 million sitting on a dock, and a client who's already called twice. Marcus closed his eyes. Ellie was heavy on his shoulder. Not heavy like a burden, heavy like an anchor. The only thing keeping him from drifting into the version of himself that didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't care. "Give me 10 minutes, he said. "I need you on the logistics floor. I pulled up the original manifest, but I need your sign-off and— 10 minutes, Tom." He hung up. He looked at Ellie. She was out. Deep asleep, that boneless baby sleep where her whole body went limp and warm. He couldn't take her down to logistics. The floor was chaos, even on good days, forklifts, conveyor noise, people shouting over machines. He couldn't leave the building. Not with $6.2 million on the line and a boss who already questioned whether he could handle the job. He made a decision he would replay in his head 1,000 times. He walked back to his desk. He pulled open the bottom drawer where he kept a folded blanket, the one Janine had packed in the diaper bag the day Ellie was born, cream-colored with little yellow ducks. He spread it on the short couch in the corner of his office, the one nobody ever sat on. He laid Ellie down. She didn't wake. He tucked the blanket around her and set the diaper bag beside the couch. 10 minutes, he whispered. "I'll be right back." He grabbed the baby monitor from the diaper bag, an old audio-only one that Janine's mother had given them, and clipped it to his belt. Then he left. The logistics floor was 2 levels down. Tom was already standing by the freight terminal with a stack of papers and a look on his face that said this was going to take longer than 10 minutes. It took 43 minutes of cross-referencing port codes and arguing with a customs officer in Singapore over a conference line while Tom paced and Marcus kept one hand on the baby monitor clipped to his belt, listening for any sound. At the 30-minute mark, he heard something. A small cry. Thin and sharp. The kind Ellie made when she woke up disoriented and couldn't find him. His stomach dropped. "Tom, finish this. I have to go." "Marcus, we're not— Finish it." He didn't wait. He hit the elevator and jabbed the button for 14. The monitor was crackling now, picking up more cries. Ellie was awake, and she was scared, and she was alone, and he had left her alone on a couch on an empty floor in a dark building because he thought he could handle it all. Because he always thought he could handle it all. The elevator opened. He ran. Past the conference room. Past the break room. He rounded the corner toward his office, and that's when he heard it. Silence. Ellie had stopped crying. His heart didn't slow down. It sped up. Because silence was worse. Silence meant something had changed. Silence meant someone. He saw the light first. Spilling out from Victoria's office, brighter now, like she'd turned on the second lamp. Her glass door was half open. He moved toward it, and stopped. Victoria Hale was sitting in her wheelchair, positioned close to the couch where he had left Ellie. But Ellie wasn't on the couch anymore. She was in Victoria's lap. Victoria was holding the bottle from the diaper bag, the pre-mixed formula Marcus always kept ready, and feeding his daughter with a steadiness and calm that didn't match anything Marcus knew about this woman. Victoria's head was tilted slightly, watching Ellie drink. One hand cradled the baby's head. The other held the bottle at the exact right angle, not too steep, not too flat. Like she'd done it before. Like she'd done it 100 times. Marcus didn't think. He shoved the door. Marcus didn't think. He shoved the door the rest of the way open. The glass hit the wall behind it with a crack that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet. "What are you doing?" Victoria's head snapped up. The bottle slipped an inch. A drop of formula hit Ellie's chin, but the baby didn't cry. She just blinked and kept drinking. "Marcus, give me my daughter." He crossed the room in 3 steps, his hands already reaching. "Marcus, stop. Listen to me. Give her to me. Now." Victoria didn't hand her over. She adjusted her grip on the baby, instead pulling Ellie slightly closer. "She was crying," Victoria said. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something Marcus was too angry to hear. "I heard her from my office. She was alone and she was crying and You had no right. She was scared. She's my daughter." "I know that." "Then why are you holding her like she's yours?" The words came out harder than he meant them, sharper. They hung in the air like smoke. Victoria's face changed. Not anger, something deeper, something that cracked through the composure she wore like armor. "Because I know what it sounds like," she said quietly, "when a baby cries and nobody comes." Marcus stopped reaching. His hands were still out, suspended between them, but his body had gone still. "What?" Victoria looked down at Ellie. The baby had finished the bottle and was making those small, satisfied sounds, the ones that meant she was full and safe and about to fall asleep again. "Before the accident," Victoria said, "I had a life you never knew about. None of you did." Marcus slowly lowered his hands. "I had a daughter." The room changed. The air changed. Something in Marcus's chest folded in on itself like paper. "She was born 8 weeks early. I was 26. I wasn't CEO of anything. I was working night shifts at a distribution warehouse in Trenton, pulling 14-hour days because her father left the minute the ultrasound showed complications." Victoria's thumb moved gently across Ellie's forehead. "She lived for 11 days. Marcus couldn't speak. He wanted to. He opened his mouth and nothing came out. 11 days, Victoria repeated. And on the 4th night the hospital was short-staffed and she was crying in her incubator, and I couldn't get anyone to come. I was 19 and terrified, and she was alone and crying, and I couldn't. She stopped. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes were wet, but nothing fell. So when I heard your baby crying on an empty floor in a dark building, I didn't think about optics. I didn't think about HR policies or boundaries or what it would look like. I thought about an 11-day-old girl who needed someone to hold her. And I couldn't. I couldn't just sit in my office and listen. Marcus's legs gave slightly. He grabbed the edge of Victoria's desk and leaned against it. I didn't know, he said. Nobody knows. Victoria, don't apologize yet. Because you were right to be angry. She's your child and you walked in and saw something that scared you. And you reacted the way any father should. You accused me of overstepping. And I did. I know I did. But I'd do it again, Marcus. Every time. I'd do it every single time. Ellie was asleep now. Fully asleep, her body curled against Victoria's stomach with the kind of trust that babies give freely before the world teaches them not to. Marcus watched his daughter sleep in the arms of a woman he'd worked under for 3 years and never once seen as anything other than the name on the building. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? He asked. Victoria laughed softly. It wasn't a happy sound. Because when you're a woman in a wheelchair running a company full of people waiting for you to fail, you don't hand them your grief. You hand them quarterly earnings. That's no way to live. It's the way I survived. Marcus pulled a chair close and sat down slowly, like moving too fast would shatter whatever fragile thing had formed between them. My wife, he started. Janine, Victoria said. He looked at her. I read your leave request when she passed, she said. I approved it personally. You asked for 2 weeks. I gave you 4. That was you. HR wanted to give you the standard bereavement. 2 weeks. I overrode it. You never said anything. What would I have said? I understand. You would have heard it as corporate sympathy. You would have filed it away with every other condolence card and casserole dish and forgotten it by Thursday. She was right. He would have. But you didn't just lose a wife, Victoria continued. You lost the person who was supposed to help you raise her. She nodded toward Ellie. And then you came back to work 3 weeks later and pretended you were fine. And I watched. Because I've done the same thing. I've been doing the same thing for 20 years. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. I'm drowning, he said. And it was the first time he'd said it out loud. Not to his mother on the phone who lived 2 states away. Not to Tom or any of the guys at work who clapped his back and said, hang in there, man. Not to the grief counselor he went to twice and stopped going to because he couldn't afford the copay. I'm drowning, and I don't know how to ask for help, because every time I do, someone looks at me like I'm failing. Victoria nodded. I know. I set up a little area by my desk with blankets and a bottle warmer because daycare canceled again, and I had nowhere else to go, and I thought if I could just get through the day without anyone noticing. I noticed the first week. And you didn't say anything. I was trying to figure out how to help without making you feel like a project. Marcus stared at her. A project. That's what happens when the CEO offers help. It becomes a program, a policy, a press release. I didn't want to turn your pain into a memo. So you were just going to watch, wait, and be here if it got bad enough. It got bad enough 3 months ago. I know. I should have acted sooner. I was scared too, Marcus. Scared of what? That you'd look at me exactly the way you looked at me 10 minutes ago, like I was the enemy. The word hit him in the chest. You're not the enemy, he said. No, I'm not. I'm just a woman in a wheelchair who can't reach the top shelf in her own kitchen and runs a billion-dollar company from a chair that everyone stares at like it defines me. And tonight I held your daughter because she was crying, and I was the only one here. And it felt like the most useful thing I've done in 18 months. Marcus couldn't hold it anymore. He put his face in his hands, and he broke. Not loud, not dramatic. The way grown men break silent and total shoulders, shaking, breathing ragged. The kind of crying you do when you've been holding it for so long that it doesn't come out in tears so much as in surrender. Victoria didn't move. She didn't reach for him. She just sat in her chair with his sleeping daughter in her arms and let him fall apart. Because she knew. She knew that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is not try to fix it. Just witness it. Just be in the room when someone finally stops pretending. It lasted 3 minutes, maybe 4. When Marcus raised his head, his eyes were red and his jaw was set, and he looked like a man who had just put something down that he'd been carrying for a very long time. Thank you, he said. For what? For not looking away. Victoria adjusted Ellie gently. Do you want to take her? He nodded. He stood and reached down, and Victoria transferred the baby into his arms with the kind of practiced care that comes from muscle memory. Their hands touched for a second, his wide and rough hers, thin and scarred from the accident. Ellie sighed in her sleep. That deep, full-body baby sigh that means everything is right. Marcus held her close. He closed his eyes. I should go, he said. Meter's probably already expired. Marcus! He looked back. Tomorrow, Victoria said. Come to my office. 9 a.m. There's something I want to discuss. Not about tonight. About the future. What kind of future? The kind where people like us don't have to choose between being good at our jobs and being good at staying alive. He didn't know what that meant. Not yet. But for the first time in 7 months, he felt something he couldn't name. Something warm and terrifying and completely unfamiliar. It felt like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't alone. He walked out of her office past the darkened hallway into the elevator. Ellie's breath was warm against his neck. And Victoria sat in the silence of her office, her lap still warm where the baby had been, her hands resting on the arms of her wheelchair. She didn't move for a long time. She was thinking about an incubator in Trenton. About tiny fingers that never got strong enough to grip. About 11 days that had shaped every decision she'd ever made since. She picked up her phone and opened a blank document. She typed 2 words. Change everything. Then she turned off of the lamp, wheeled herself to the elevator, and went home. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He got Ellie home, changed her, laid her in the crib, and stood in the hallway of his apartment, staring at the wall for what felt like an hour. His hands still smelled like formula, and Victoria's office, that faint mix of leather and antiseptic cream she used on the scars along her wrists from the accident. He kept seeing it. The image burned behind his eyelids every time he blinked. His daughter curled in the lap of a woman he barely knew. Not his wife. Not his mother. A woman in a wheelchair who ran a company worth more than the entire block he lived on. And the humming. That low, soft humming that had stopped Ellie's crying before he even made it back to the floor. He sat on the edge of his bed at 1:15 in the morning and picked up his phone. He scrolled through his contacts. His mother's name sat there. Ruth Reed, Greensboro, North Carolina. He could call her. She'd answer on the second ring the way she always did. Voice already worried before he said a word. But what would he say, Mom? My boss held my baby tonight and I screamed at her, and then she told me she lost a child and I cried in front of her like I haven't cried since Janine's funeral. He put the phone down. At 6:30, Ellie woke up screaming. He heated a bottle, fed her in the rocking chair Janine had picked out at a yard sale 3 weeks before she died, and got them both dressed by 7:45. He dropped her at daycare, the one that was actually open today, and sat in the parking lot for 5 minutes with the engine running. 9 a.m., Victoria's office. He had no idea what she wanted to discuss, but the way she'd said it, the kind where people like us don't have to choose between being good at our jobs and being good at staying alive. That sentence had been circling his brain like a dog that wouldn't lie down. He pulled into the company lot at 8:20. Early. He was always early now. It was the one thing he could still control. Tom Griffith was waiting by his desk when he got upstairs. Singapore's cleared, Tom said. Customs released the container at 4 a.m. their time. We're good. Good. You okay? You took off fast last night. I'm fine, Tom. Because you looked... I said I'm fine. Tom held up both hands. All right, just checking. Marcus sat down. His desk was exactly as he'd left it. Laptop back in place. Janine's photo facing him. The little corner behind the filing cabinet where he'd set up Ellie's things. A folded blanket, a container of formula, a pack of wipes was still there, half hidden, but not hidden enough. He wondered if other people had noticed. If they walked by his office and saw the yellow duck blanket and connected the dots. He wondered how long Victoria had known. At 8:55 he stood up, straightened his tie, and walked to her office. Her assistant Diane was already at the desk outside. Diane was 62, had been with the company since before Victoria took over, and had the kind of face that gave away nothing. She's expecting you, Diane said. Go in. Marcus pushed the door open. Victoria was behind her desk. Wheelchair pulled close, laptop open, reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked like she'd been there for hours. Knowing her, she had. Sit down, she said. Not cold, not warm either. Somewhere in between. The CEO voice. The one that made rooms full of executives stop talking. He sat. Closed the door. He got up, closed. It sat back down. Victoria took off her glasses and set them on the desk. She looked at him the way she looked at quarterly reports, direct, analytical, measuring something. How long has daycare been canceling on you? Victoria, if this is about last night. Answer the question, he exhaled. 3 times in the last 2 weeks. Twice the month before that. And when they cancel, what do you do? I figure it out. Meaning you bring her here. I don't have a choice. I'm not judging you, Marcus. I'm asking because I need to understand the scope of the problem. The scope of the problem is that I'm a single father with no family within 400 miles, a daycare that treats reliability like a suggestion, and a job that requires me to be in this building 50 hours a week minimum. That's the scope. Victoria nodded slowly. And you haven't told anyone? Who would I tell? HR, your direct supervisor, me. And say what, hey, I can't do my job because I can't find someone to watch my kid? You know what happens to men who say that in this building? They get the sympathetic nod, and then they get passed over for the next promotion because suddenly they're a risk. You think I don't know that? I think you've never had to worry about it. Victoria's eyes hardened. Just a flash. Just enough to let him know he'd stepped somewhere he shouldn't have. Marcus, I've spent the last 18 months fighting a board of directors who wanted to remove me because they decided a woman in a wheelchair couldn't run a company. I've sat in meetings where men who report to me talked over me around me and sometimes literally past me because my eye line is 2 feet lower than theirs. I have worried about every single version of not enough that exists in a corporate structure. So don't tell me what I've never had to worry about. He clenched his jaw. That's not what I know what you meant, and you're partially right. I've never been a single parent trying to hold it together in a building that wasn't built for people like us. But I've been the other thing, the one who's supposed to lead and can't even get into the bathroom on this floor without someone holding a door. They still haven't fixed that. They fixed it 6 months ago, after I sent 14 emails. 14. I counted. Something shifted between them, not warmth exactly, more like recognition. The kind of thing that happens when two people realize they've been fighting the same war on different fronts. What did you want to discuss? Marcus asked. Victoria turned her laptop around so he could see the screen. It was a document, 2 pages. No formatting, just raw text typed in a hurry. I wrote this at midnight, she said, after you left. He leaned forward and read the first line, Proposal for Structural Family Support Integration. That's a mouthful, he said. I'll work on the title. Read the rest. He read, On-site childcare for employees with children under 5. Flexible scheduling options for single parents and primary caregivers. Emergency backup care partnerships with 3 local providers. Mental health support. Not the generic EAP hotline that nobody called, but actual embedded counseling available during work hours. A parental liaison position. A quiet room on every floor for nursing mothers and overwhelmed parents who just needed 10 minutes. He looked up. You wrote this in one night. I've been thinking about it for months. Last night I just finally typed it. The board will never approve this. The board doesn't have a choice. Victoria, I own 41% of this company. I built it from a warehouse floor in Trenton, where I worked double shifts while my daughter was dying in a hospital 12 miles away. The board serves at my pleasure, not the other way around. And if they want to fight me on providing basic human infrastructure for the people who make this company run, they can try. But they'll lose. Marcus sat back. He'd seen Victoria in negotiations before. He'd watched her dismantle a hostile acquisition attempt with 3 sentences and a silence that made the other side's lawyers physically uncomfortable. But this was different. This wasn't business. Why are you showing me this? He asked. Because I want you to help me build it. I'm operations. I move freight and manage logistics. I don't. You're a single father who has been quietly solving an impossible problem every day for 7 months without a single complaint, a single missed deadline, or a single request for help. That makes you the most qualified person in this building to tell me what parents actually need. Not what a consultant thinks they need. Not what a focus group suggests. What they actually need at 6 in the morning when the daycare calls and says they're closed and you've got a meeting in 2 hours. You want me to co-lead this? I want you to make it real. I can get the funding. I can handle the board, but I need someone who knows what the problem looks like from the inside. And Marcus, I need someone who's willing to be honest about it. Not corporate honest. Actually honest. He was quiet for a long time. Last night, he said slowly, when I walked in and saw you holding her, I was terrified. I know. Not because I thought you'd hurt her. I was terrified because someone was taking care of her and it wasn't me. And if someone else can take care of her, then maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not necessary. Victoria's expression didn't change, but her hands tightened slightly on the arms of her chair. That's the lie, she said. What? That's the lie grief tells you, that your only value is in being the one who holds everything together, and that if anyone else helps, it means you failed. I believed that lie for 20 years. It almost killed me long before the accident did. I don't know how to stop believing it. You don't stop all at once. You stop one moment at a time, Last night was one moment. Last night I yelled at you. Yes, and then you stayed. That's the part that matters. Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. He felt like he'd run a marathon without moving. If I do this, he said, if I help you build this, people are going to find out about Ellie, about the daycare situation, about all of it. Yes. And some of them are going to look at me differently. Some of them already do. The difference is, right now they're guessing. If you step into this, you control the story. I've never been good at controlling stories. Janine was the one who... He stopped, swallowed hard. She was the one who knew how to talk to people, how to make things make sense. I just do the work. Then do the work. That's all I'm asking. He stared at the document on her screen. 2 pages that could change how 3,000 employees experience their lives, or 2 pages that could blow up in both their faces and give the board exactly the ammunition they needed to push Victoria out and demote Marcus to a regional office in Ohio. Can I think about it? You can have until end of day Friday. That's 3 days. I know, the board meets Monday. If I'm going to present this, I need to know you're standing next to me. Standing next to you in front of the board. Yes. The same board that's been trying to replace you for a year. The same board that's about to learn what happens when they underestimate me. Again. Marcus almost smiled. Almost. Friday, he said. Friday. He stood up and walked to the door. His hand was on the handle when Victoria spoke again. Marcus. He turned. She has your eyes. He didn't trust himself to respond to that. He nodded once and walked out. Diane didn't look up from her computer as he passed, but she said quietly, "Your tie is crooked." He fixed it in the elevator. The rest of the day passed the way days pass when your entire understanding of your life has been rearranged overnight. Marcus went through the motions, emails, calls, a supply chain review with his team, but his brain was somewhere else entirely. It was in Victoria's office reading those 2 pages. It was in the parking lot of the daycare engine running, wondering why he'd never said anything to anyone. It was 7 months ago, standing in a cemetery, in a suit he'd bought the day before, because he didn't own one that fit anymore, holding a baby who would never know her mother. At lunch he went to the break room and found Karen Wu, the CFO, making tea. Karen was 58, sharp as a blade, and one of the few executives who'd openly supported Victoria after the accident. She also had 3 grown children and a habit of saying exactly what she thought, regardless of who was in the room. "You look terrible," Karen said. "Thanks. I mean it. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? Define sleep." Karen poured hot water over her tea bag and studied him. "I heard you were in Victoria's office this morning. Door closed. 45 minutes. News travels fast. This floor is smaller than people think. What did she want?" Marcus hesitated. "I can't talk about it yet." "Can't or won't?" "Can't. She asked me to sit with something until Friday." Karen nodded. She took a sip of her tea. "Can I give you some unsolicited advice?" "Could I stop you?" "Whatever she asked you to do, do it. That woman doesn't ask for help. I've known her for 11 years, and I can count on one hand the number of times she's asked anyone for anything. If she's asking you, it means she trusts you, and trust from Victoria Hale is not something you throw back. It's complicated, Karen. Everything worth doing is complicated. Raising my kids was complicated. Getting my husband through chemo was complicated. Running the finances of this company while the board plays politics is complicated. That's not a reason to say no. That's just the shape of things that matter." She picked up her tea and left. Marcus stood in the break room alone, holding an empty coffee mug, thinking about the shape of things that matter. That afternoon, something happened that Marcus didn't expect. He was walking past the legal department when he heard raised voices behind a closed door. He recognized one of them, David Chen's senior counsel, a man Marcus had always respected for his calm demeanor and precise thinking. But David wasn't calm now. "I'm telling you, I can't keep doing this." David's voice was tight, strained. My mother had another fall last week. That's the third one this year. I'm burning through my PTO covering her doctor's appointments, and the home care agency just dropped her because they're understaffed and— The other voice, softer. Probably. David's assistant murmured something Marcus couldn't make out. No, I haven't told anyone, David said. Because the last guy who told HR he needed caregiver leave got put on the restructuring list 3 months later. Coincidence, right? Marcus walked away, but the words followed him back to his desk. He sat down and opened his email. There, buried between supply chain updates and meeting invites, was a message from Victoria. No subject line, just 2 sentences I forgot to mention. The baby monitor you left in my office is on Diane's desk whenever you want it back. He stared at the screen. He'd forgotten about the monitor. He'd clipped it to his belt, and then at some point during the chaos of last night, he must have set it down in her office without realizing. She'd kept it. She could have thrown it away. Could have had Diane drop it at his desk without a word. Instead, she'd sent him this email. Personal. Direct. A small thread connecting last night to today. He typed a reply. Thank you, I'll pick it up. Then he deleted it and typed, Thank you for everything. I'll pick it up this afternoon. Then he deleted that too and typed, I don't need until Friday. The answer is yes. He stared at the words. His finger hovered over the send button. He thought about Janine. What would she say? He could almost hear her voice, that warm, practical tone she used when he was overthinking something. Baby, just hit send. What's the worst that happens? You help people. He pressed send. The reply came in 40 seconds. Victoria must have been watching her inbox. Good. My office. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. Bring coffee. I take mine black. He almost laughed. Almost. At 5:15, he packed up his desk, grabbed his bag, and headed for the elevator. On the way, he stopped at Diane's desk and picked up the baby monitor. It was sitting in a small paper bag, neatly folded at the top. She cleaned it, Diane said without looking up. What? The monitor. It had formula on it. She cleaned it before she gave it to me. Marcus held the paper bag and felt something shift in his chest. A wall he'd built brick by brick, grief by grief, had a crack in it now, and light was getting through. He drove to daycare. Ellie was sitting in a bouncer chewing on a rubber giraffe, looking at him with Janine's eyes. He picked her up and pressed his face against her hair and breathed in that baby smell powder and milk and something else, something that was just her. Hey, baby girl, he whispered. Daddy had a big day. She grabbed his ear and pulled. He laughed, a real laugh. The first one in weeks that didn't feel like it was covering something else. On the drive home, he called his mother. Hey, Mama. Marcus, what's wrong? Is the baby okay? She's fine. Everything's fine. I wanted to talk to you. Silence on the other end. The kind of silence that meant Ruth Reed was recalculating everything she thought she knew about this phone call. About what baby? About asking for help. Marcus Elijah Reed, are you telling me you're finally ready to let somebody in? I'm saying I'm trying. Well, praise God. It only took 7 months and the stubbornness of your father, rest his soul. Mama. No, let me have this. I've been waiting for this call since the funeral. You stood there at that cemetery like a stone statue holding that baby, and I wanted to shake you and say, boy, let somebody carry something for you. But you're your father's son. The man would rather have pushed his own broken-down car uphill in a rainstorm than ask the neighbor for a jump. I remember. And where did that get him? Bad back, bad knees, and a pride the size of Texas. I get it, Mama. Do you? Because I've been sitting in this house in Greensboro for 7 months with a packed bag by the door waiting for you to say the word, and every time I call you say, I'm fine, Mama, we're fine, don't worry. And I worry anyway because that's what mothers do. I know. So what happened? What changed? He thought about telling her, about Victoria and the wheelchair and the bottle and the 11-day-old baby in Trenton. But it wasn't his story to tell, not that part. "Somebody helped me when I didn't ask for it," he said. "And it made me realize I've been carrying this wrong." Carrying it wrong how? Like it was all mine, like asking for help meant I couldn't handle being her father. Baby asking for help is how you handle being her father. You think I raised you and your sister alone? Your Aunt Della was at my house 3 times a week. Your grandmother took you every Saturday so I could breathe. It takes a village, Marcus. It always has. I know, I forgot. Well, you remember now. So, what do you need? Right now, I need you to come up here. Not forever. Just for a little while. I've got something happening at work that's going to take a lot of my time, and I need someone I trust with Ellie. When do you want me? This weekend. I'll be on the road Friday morning. Mama, you don't have to. Boy, I have been packed for 7 months. Do not test me. He smiled. Really smiled. The kind that reached all the way up and made his eyes burn for a completely different reason. Thank you, Mama. Don't thank me. Just have clean sheets on the guest bed and some decent coffee in that kitchen. That store-brand mess you buy tastes like dirt. Yes, ma'am. And Marcus? Yeah. I'm proud of you. Your father would be too. He couldn't speak for a second. He just drove one hand on the wheel, Ellie babbling in the back seat, his mother breathing steady on the other end of the line. I love you, Mama. I love you too, baby. Now go feed my granddaughter. I'll call you tomorrow. She hung up first. She always did. Ruth Reed didn't believe in long goodbyes. Marcus pulled into his apartment complex, parked, and sat for a minute. The sun was going down. The parking lot was half empty. Ellie was talking to herself in her car seat, those nonsense syllables that sounded like she was working through her own problems. He looked at her in the rearview mirror. Things are going to change, Ellie, he said. I don't know exactly how yet, but they're going to change. She blew a spit bubble and laughed at it. Good enough. He got her inside, fed her, bathed her, and laid her down in the crib. She went out fast. Whatever was in that formula Victoria had given her last night must have reset her whole system, because she'd been sleeping better all day. Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open and Victoria's document pulled up on his screen. 2 pages. Raw text. A framework for something that could actually help people. He started typing. Not edits to her proposal. Something new. A list, not a corporate list, not bullet points for a PowerPoint. A real list. Everything he wished someone had offered him in the last 7 months. Everything he'd needed and never asked for. He typed until midnight, and when he finally closed the laptop and walked to Ellie's room to check on her one last time, he stood in the doorway and listened to her breathe, and thought about Victoria Hale, sitting alone in her office, holding a baby that wasn't hers, humming a song nobody else would ever hear. 2 people in a building full of glass walls. Both of them finally tired of being invisible. 7 a.m. came fast. Marcus had been up since 5, not because Ellie woke him, but because his brain wouldn't shut off. He'd spent the last hour rereading the notes he'd typed at midnight, 6 pages of raw, unfiltered thoughts about what single parents needed in a workplace. Not corporate language, not polished proposals, just the truth written by a man who'd been living it. He dropped Ellie at daycare at 6:30. She went easy, reaching for the teacher's hands without crying, and Marcus felt that familiar twist in his gut, the one that came every time she let go of him willingly. He knew it was healthy. He knew it meant she was adjusting. But some mornings, it felt like she was practicing for a life without him, the way she'd already started living a life without Janine. He stopped at the coffee shop on 3rd Street. 2 black coffees. He almost ordered a third for himself, something with sugar and cream, the kind Janine used to tease him about, but decided against it. He didn't need comfort. He needed to be sharp. Victoria's office door was open when he arrived. She was already reading something on her laptop, glasses on, hair pulled back tight. Diane wasn't at her desk yet. The floor was empty. Just the two of them and the hum of the building waking up. "Black," Marcus said, setting the cup on her desk. "You're 3 minutes early." My mother raised me right. She sounds like a woman I'd like to meet. She's coming this weekend, so you might get your chance. Victoria took a sip of the coffee and set it down. "Sit. Show me what you wrote." He pulled out his laptop, opened the document, and slid it across the desk so she could read it. He watched her face while she scrolled. Victoria had the kind of expression that most people couldn't read. Flat controlled the result of decades spent in rooms where showing emotion was treated like showing weakness. But Marcus was learning to read the cracks. A slight tightening around her eyes when something surprised her. A softening in her jaw when something landed. She read for 8 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up. "You wrote this last night. After midnight." "This is better than what I wrote." "It's not better. It's different. Yours is the structure. Mine is what goes inside it. Emergency on-call childcare within a 30-minute response window," she read aloud. "A dedicated parent hotline that connects to actual human beings, not a phone tree. Flex scheduling that doesn't require manager approval because the approval process itself is the barrier." She paused. "That last one is going to be a fight. Everything on that list is going to be a fight. I know, but some fights are worth starting." She turned the laptop back to him. "The board meets Monday at 10. I need this turned into something presentable by Sunday night. Not a slideshow, not a pitch deck. A proposal with numbers, timelines, and a cost analysis that Karen can back up." "You've already talked to Karen." "I called her at 6 this morning. And she said, and I'm quoting, 'It's about damn time.'" Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Karen's support mattered. She was the one person on the board who could turn a vision into a budget line without blinking. "There's something else," Victoria said. She took off her glasses and set them down. That meant the business part was over. That meant this was personal. "When we present this, the board is going to ask why. Not why the company needs it. They can read the retention data and the recruitment numbers. They're going to ask why now. Why us? And someone, probably Richard, is going to imply that this is emotional, that I'm compromised, that you and I have some kind of relationship." That's the polite version of what Richard will say. Richard Thornton, vice chair of the board, 63 years old. Old money, old ideas. He'd been the loudest voice calling for Victoria's removal after the accident. Not because he thought she couldn't do the job, because he thought a woman in a wheelchair made the company look weak. He'd never said that out loud, of course. He said things like leadership optics and stakeholder confidence and long-term stability planning. But everyone knew what he meant. "So what do we do about Richard?" Marcus asked. "We don't do anything about Richard. Richard is going to do what Richard does. He's going to posture and insinuate and try to make this about anything other than the actual proposal. Our job is to make the proposal so airtight that his objections sound exactly as petty as they are. And if he brings up Tuesday night, if someone saw you holding Ellie and let him. Victoria, let him. Because if Richard Thornton wants to stand up in a boardroom and argue that a CEO comforting a crying baby is a scandal, he's going to look like exactly what he is. And what's that? A man who's never been alone with a child in his life." Marcus almost laughed. "You've thought about this." "I've thought about Richard Thornton every day for 18 months. I know his playbook better than he does. He leads with condescension, pivots to concern, and finishes with a veiled threat about shareholder value. It's the same speech every time. The only difference is the target. And this time the target is both of us. This time the target is an idea that threatens his version of how power works. Richard believes leadership means control. That strength means never needing anything from anyone. That vulnerability is a liability." She leaned forward. Sound familiar? It did. It sounded exactly like what Marcus had believed until 2 nights ago. "I'm not saying Richard and I are the same. I'm not saying that either. I'm saying the lie is the same. And it's everywhere. It's in this building. It's in every building like it. And it's killing people. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But slowly, the way drowning kills you when you stop waving your arms and just sink. I was sinking. I know. I watched. You could have thrown me a line sooner. I could have, and you would have let go of it, because you weren't ready. He wanted to argue. He couldn't. Are you ready now? She asked. I'm here at 7 a.m. with black coffee and 6 pages of notes. What do you think? I think you're ready. They worked for 2 hours straight. Victoria handled the structural framework, the legal language, the HR integration, the phased rollout timeline. Marcus built the human layer, the real-world scenarios, the failure points of existing systems, the stories that numbers couldn't tell. At 9:15, Diane knocked. Your 9:30 is here, she said to Victoria. Push it to 10. It's the CFO of Meridian Partners. Push it to 10. Diane disappeared without another word. You just pushed a meeting with Meridian, Marcus said. That's a $40 million account. And this is a 3,000-person company full of employees who are one missed daycare call away from a breakdown. Meridian can wait 15 minutes. That sentence, Meridian can wait, was the moment Marcus fully understood what Victoria was willing to risk. This wasn't a PR move. This wasn't a legacy project she'd slap on a press release and forget. She was rearranging her priorities in real time in front of him, and she didn't care who noticed. I should get back to my desk before people start talking more than they already are, Marcus said. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You're the CEO. And you think that protects me, Marcus? I've heard every version of every rumor this building can produce. When I came back after the accident, someone on the 4th floor started a pool betting on how long I'd last. 6 months was the most popular option. That was 18 months ago. Who bet on you staying? Victoria paused. Diane. She put $50 on indefinitely. Smart woman. The smartest person in this building, and she answers my phones. Life isn't fair. Marcus gathered his laptop and stood. Sunday night. I'll have everything ready. I know you will. He left her office and walked back to his desk. The floor was filling up now, people arriving coffee in hand, settling into the routine of another day. Nobody looked at Marcus differently. Nobody whispered as he passed. Whatever rumors existed, they hadn't reached critical mass yet. But they would. He knew that. The moment they stood in front of that board, everything would change. He spent the rest of Wednesday and all of Thursday building the proposal. Late nights at the kitchen table, after Ellie went to sleep, laptop glowing coffee going cold. He called Karen twice to verify budget projections. She answered both times, once from her car, once from what sounded like a restaurant. The childcare component alone is going to cost $300,000 in the first year, Karen said during the second call. That includes facility build-out, staffing, licensing, and insurance. And what does employee turnover cost? Last year, $1.2 million in recruiting, onboarding, and lost productivity. So we're spending $300,000 to save over $1 million. That's exactly what I'm going to tell the board, with a pie chart, because Richard likes pie charts. Makes him feel like he understands math. Marcus grinned. Karen Wu was a weapon, and she was on their side. Friday morning, Ruth Reed called from the road. I'm passing Richmond, she said. I'll be there by 2. Mama, you didn't have to leave at dawn. I've been awake since 4. Your father used to say a woman who sleeps past 5 is wasting God's daylight. Daddy also used to say mayonnaise was a food group. Don't speak ill of the dead, Marcus. Yes, ma'am. She arrived at 1:45, 20 minutes early, because Ruth Reed did not believe in being on time. On time was late. She walked into his apartment carrying 2 suitcases and a Tupperware container of fried chicken that filled the entire hallway with the smell of his childhood. Ellie was on the floor, rolling toward a stuffed elephant. Ruth set down her bags, walked straight to the baby, and picked her up like she'd been doing it every day. "Oh, there she is," Ruth whispered. "There's my girl. Look at you, looking just like your mama." Marcus stood by the door watching his mother hold his daughter. Something inside him unclenched. A fist he'd been making for 7 months so tight he'd forgotten his hand was closed. "You okay, baby?" Ruth asked, looking at him over Ellie's head. "I'm okay, Mama." "You're lying, but you're better than you were on the phone Monday night, so I'll take it." She moved through the apartment like she owned it, unpacking, rearranging the kitchen, finding the baby supplies, and reorganizing them into what she called a system that makes sense instead of this bachelor chaos. Marcus let her. He'd learned long ago that arguing with Ruth Reed about domestic organization was like arguing with gravity. That evening, after Ellie was asleep, and Ruth was settled in the guest room with a novel and her reading glasses, Marcus sat in the living room and worked on the proposal. He was deep into the emergency backup care section when his phone buzzed. Victoria. A text this time, not an email. "How's it coming? Almost done. Karen sent me the revised budget projections. Numbers are strong. Good. There's something I need to tell you before Monday. What Richard knows." Marcus's stomach tightened. "Knows what exactly?" "About the proposal. Someone leaked it." "I don't know who. He called me tonight. Didn't threaten. Didn't argue. Just said, 'I hope you know what you're doing,' which, if you know Richard, is worse than a threat." Marcus put his phone down and stared at the wall. Richard, knowing ahead of time, changed the calculation. It meant he'd have the weekend to prepare a counter-argument, to rally allies on the board, to build a case for why this was reckless, emotional, financially irresponsible. He picked the phone back up. "Does this change the plan?" "No. It moves up the timeline. I'm calling an emergency session for Saturday afternoon instead of waiting until Monday." "Saturday. Tomorrow. 3 p.m. Can you be ready?" Marcus looked at the proposal on his screen. 90% done. The remaining 10% was polished transitions, formatting, the kind of cosmetic work that made documents look professional but didn't change the substance. "I'll be ready. Bring your notes. Not the clean version. The real one. The midnight one." "Why?" "Because the board needs to hear from someone who isn't speaking in abstractions. They need to hear what 6 a.m. sounds like when the daycare calls and there's no one else." He didn't respond for a full minute. Then he typed, "I've never spoken in front of the board before." "I know. That's why it'll work. They've heard from people like me 1,000 times. They've never heard from someone like you. Someone like me meaning what? Someone who's actually living it. Someone who isn't protected by a title or a corner office. Someone who's got formula stains on his cuffs and a baby photo on his desk and a reason to care that isn't theoretical." He read her words 3 times. Each time they hit different. "I'll be there. 3 p.m. boardroom. Wear the gray suit." "How do you know I have a gray suit, Marcus? I notice everything. That's how I survived." 3 p.m. He put the phone down and leaned back on the couch. His heart was beating faster than it should have been. Not fear, exactly. More like the feeling before a jump, that moment when your body knows what's coming and your brain hasn't caught up. "Who are you texting this late?" Ruth was standing in the hallway, arms crossed, reading glasses on top of her head. "My boss. The woman in the wheelchair. Her name is Victoria." "I know her name. I've been reading about her since you started this job. She's the one who built the company from nothing, right? The one they tried to push out after the accident." "That's her." Ruth came into the living room and sat in the armchair across from him. "What's happening, Marcus? And don't give me the sanitized version." So he told her. All of it. Tuesday night. Ellie crying. Victoria holding her. The argument. The revelation about Victoria's daughter, the one who lived 11 days. The proposal. The midnight notes. Richard. The board meeting tomorrow. Ruth listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "This woman," Ruth said finally. "She lost a child." "Yes." "And she heard your child crying and she went to her." "Yes." "And you yelled at her." "Mama?" "I'm not judging you, Marcus. I'm saying that woman walked through a door that most people would have walked past. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "I think so." "No, listen to me. When your father died, I had neighbors who crossed the street to avoid talking to me. I had friends who stopped calling because grief made them uncomfortable. People don't walk toward pain, Marcus. They walk away from it." This woman wheeled herself toward a crying baby in a dark building because something inside her wouldn't let her do anything else. That's not a boss. That's not a CEO. That's a mother. Whether her child is alive or not, that's a mother. Marcus felt his throat close. "And tomorrow you're going to stand up in front of a room full of suits and tell them what it's like to be drowning," Ruth continued. "And some of them won't care. And some of them will pretend to care. But some of them, maybe just one will hear you. And that one person is enough. That's how change works. Not all at once, one person at a time." "What if I can't do it? What if I get in there and freeze?" "Then you think about that baby sleeping in the next room. And you think about every morning you've woken up scared and did it anyway. And you open your mouth and you tell the truth. The truth doesn't need to be polished, Marcus. It just needs to be said." She stood up, crossed the room, and put her hand on his cheek. Her palm was warm and rough and felt exactly like safety. "Now go to bed. You've got a big day tomorrow, and you look like you haven't slept since the Clinton administration." "I love you, Mama." "I know you do. Go to bed." He did. And for the first time in months, he slept straight through until morning. Saturday came in fast and bright. Marcus was up at 6, showered and dressed by 7. The gray suit. He hadn't worn it since Janine's company Christmas party 2 years ago. She'd picked it out. Said it made his shoulders look like a linebacker's. He adjusted the tie in the bathroom mirror and tried to see what the board would see. A 38-year-old black man. Single father. No Ivy League pedigree, no family connections, no safety net. Just a guy who showed up every day and did the work and went home and did more work and tried not to collapse in between. Ruth fed Ellie while Marcus reviewed his notes one final time. Not the clean proposal, the midnight version, the real one. "You're going to do fine," Ruth said from the kitchen, Ellie on her hip, a bottle in her free hand. "You don't even know what I'm presenting. Doesn't matter. You've got your father's stubbornness and your mother's heart. That's all you need." He kissed Ellie on the forehead. She grabbed his tie and yanked. He untangled her fingers gently and headed for the door. "Marcus," he turned. "Whatever happens in that room, you already did the hard part. You asked for help. Everything else is just follow-through." He nodded and left. The drive to the office took 18 minutes. He parked in the underground garage and sat in the car for 3 minutes, hands on the wheel, breathing. His phone buzzed. "Victoria." "I'm already in the boardroom. Karen's here. Richard arrived 20 minutes ago. He brought Gregory." Gregory Wells, outside counsel. If Richard brought a lawyer, this wasn't a discussion. This was a battle. "I'm on my way up." He grabbed his laptop bag, locked the car, and walked toward the elevator. His shoes echoed in the empty garage. Saturday afternoon. The building was a ghost town. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor. He stepped out and turned toward the boardroom. Through the glass walls he could see them. Victoria, at the head of the table wheelchair, pulled close laptop open. Karen to her right, reading glasses on a stack of papers in front of her. Richard Thornton across from them, leaning back in his chair, with the kind of relaxed posture that was meant to communicate confidence, but actually communicated contempt. Gregory Wells beside Richard's briefcase, open pen in hand. 2 other board members were there, Sandra Park, who ran the audit committee, and James Whitfield, the longest-serving member, 71 years old, who rarely spoke, but whose vote carried enormous weight because everyone respected his judgment. Marcus pushed through the door. Every head turned. "Marcus," Victoria said. "Sit." He sat beside Karen, who slid a glass of water toward him without looking up from her papers. Richard spoke first. Of course he did. "I wasn't aware this meeting would include non-board personnel." "Marcus is presenting part of the proposal," Victoria said. "He's here at my request. A proposal that, as I understand it, was developed without board consultation or approval. Board consultation happens at board meetings, Richard, which is what this is." Richard smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Victoria, I want to be clear, I'm not here to oppose progress. I'm here to ensure that any major initiative is properly vetted and doesn't expose the company to unnecessary risk." "Then you should be very interested in what we're about to show you." "I'm also here," Richard continued, as if she hadn't spoken, "because I've heard some concerning reports about recent events on the executive floor. Events that, if true, raise questions about boundaries and judgment." There it was. The play Marcus had expected. Richard wasn't going to argue the numbers. He was going to argue the people. Victoria's expression didn't change. "If you have specific concerns, Richard, state them clearly." "I've been told that you were seen after hours with an employee's infant child, alone, in your office, and that the employee in question, Mr. Reed, discovered this, and that there was a confrontation." The room went quiet. Sandra looked at Victoria. James looked at Marcus. Gregory clicked his pen. Marcus felt his pulse in his throat. Every instinct told him to stay quiet, to let Victoria handle it, to play it safe. Instead, he opened his mouth. "That's not what happened." Richard turned to him. "Excuse me. I said that's not what happened. And I know that because I was there. Mr. Reed, with all due respect, this is a board-level discussion about my daughter. You're talking about my daughter. So with all due respect, Mr. Thornton, I think I get to speak." Richard's jaw tightened. He looked at Victoria, expecting her to intervene. She didn't. She sat perfectly still, watching Marcus the way a general watches a soldier step onto a battlefield for the first time. "My daycare canceled," Marcus said. "Again, I brought my daughter to the office because I had no other option. I left her for less than an hour to handle an emergency on the logistics floor." She started crying. Victoria heard her and went to her. She fed her a bottle and calmed her down. That's it. That's the whole story. That's an unauthorized minor on company property after business hours. That's a baby. Mr. Thornton, a 6-month-old baby, not a liability, not a risk assessment. A child. My child. And the CEO of this company did what any decent human being would do when they hear a baby crying alone. She went to her. Richard's face reddened slightly. He turned to Gregory, who leaned over and whispered something. "The legal implications alone," Richard started. "What legal implications?" Karen cut in, not looking up from her papers. "I've reviewed it. There's no policy against an employee's dependent being on premises during non-business hours. There's no liability exposure unless injury occurs, which it didn't. And there's certainly no precedent for disciplining a CEO for an act of basic human compassion. So unless Gregory has a statute I'm not aware of, I'd suggest we move on to the actual agenda." Gregory closed his mouth. He didn't have a statute. Richard sat back. The relaxed posture was gone. He looked like a man who'd thrown his best punch and watched it land on air. "Fine," he said. "Let's hear the proposal." Victoria nodded at Marcus. "Go ahead." Marcus opened his laptop. His hands were shaking. He put them flat on the table for a second to steady them, then began. "I've been with this company for 3 years. In that time, I've managed operations across 4 continents, negotiated contracts worth over $200 million, and led a team of 46 people. My performance reviews have been exceptional every quarter. I've never missed a deadline. I've never lost a client." He paused. "And 6 months ago, I almost quit." Sandra looked up. James uncrossed his arms. My wife died 7 months ago. She was 35, brain aneurysm, no warning. I went from a two-parent household to a single father overnight. And since then, every single day has been a negotiation between being good at this job and keeping my daughter alive and cared for. Not metaphorically. Literally. I have calculated to the minute how long I can be in a meeting before my daycare charges overtime. I have hidden a baby blanket in my filing cabinet because I was afraid that if anyone found out I was struggling, I'd be treated differently. I have sat in board presentations running on 3 hours of sleep and smiled because showing weakness in this building feels like career suicide. Nobody moved. And I am not the only one. David Chen in legal hasn't taken a vacation in 2 years because he's using all his PTO to care for his elderly mother. Sarah Patel in marketing pumps breast milk in a supply closet because there's no dedicated space on her floor. Tom Griffith, who runs logistics, told me last month that his wife has been asking him to go to couples therapy for a year and he can't find a window that doesn't conflict with the shipping schedule. Marcus looked around the table. This company is full of people who are performing at extraordinary levels while quietly falling apart. And the proposal Victoria and I have built isn't about charity. It's not about optics. It's about the simple mathematical reality that supporting human beings is cheaper than replacing them. He turned his laptop toward the board and walked them through the numbers. Cost of turnover versus cost of on-site childcare. Productivity loss from caregiver stress versus investment in flexible scheduling. The data Karen had compiled was devastating. Every chart, every figure, every comparison pointed to the same conclusion: the company was hemorrhaging talent and money by pretending that employees didn't have lives outside the building. When he finished, the room was silent for a 10 count. James Whitfield spoke for the first time. "How soon can this be implemented?" Victoria answered. Phase 1 emergency backup care partnerships and the flex scheduling policy can be operational within 60 days. Phase 2 on-site childcare facility is a 6-month build-out. Phase 3, mental health integration and the parental liaison position 90 days. Cost for year 1, $312,000, Karen said, against a projected savings of $1.1 million in reduced turnover alone. That's before we factor in recruitment cost avoidance, productivity gains, and the reputational value in a market where every competitor is struggling to retain talent. James nodded slowly. He looked at Richard. "Any further objections?" Richard opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I want the legal team to review the full proposal before any commitment is made," he said. "Agreed," Victoria said. "Gregory can have it by Monday. And I want it on record that I raised concerns about the process." "Noted," James said. "All in favor of advancing the proposal to formal review with a target implementation date pending legal approval?" Victoria raised her hand. Karen raised hers. Sandra raised hers. James raised his. 4-1. Richard didn't vote. He gathered his papers, nodded at Gregory, and left the room without a word. Gregory followed, briefcase clicking shut as he walked. The door closed behind them. Karen let out a long breath. "Well, that was fun." Victoria looked at Marcus. She didn't smile. But something in her eyes shifted, a loosening, a release, the way a person's face changes when they've been bracing for impact, and the crash doesn't come. "You did it," she said quietly. "We did it." "No. That speech, that was you. I gave them a proposal. You gave them a reason." Marcus looked down at his hands. They'd stopped shaking. He thought about Ellie at home with Ruth right now, probably covered in mashed bananas and laughing at something only babies find funny. He thought about Janine, who would have been proud, who would have said, "I told you so." In that way, she had half teasing, half serious, all love. He thought about 11 days in a hospital in Trenton, and a woman who carried that weight for 20 years without telling a soul. "Victoria," he said. "Yes." "Monday morning, my office. I'm going to need a bigger desk." She almost laughed. The sound caught in her throat and came out as something between a breath and a cough. "Done," she said. Karen started stacking her papers. Sandra was already typing on her phone. James sat quietly watching Victoria and Marcus with the expression of a man who'd seen a lot of boardrooms in his life and knew he'd just witnessed something he wouldn't forget. Marcus closed his laptop, stood, and walked out of the boardroom. His footsteps sounded different, heavier, like he was finally putting his full weight on the ground instead of tiptoeing through his own life. He got in the elevator. He pressed the button for the garage, and somewhere between the 14th floor and the basement, Marcus Reed started laughing. Not loud, not hysterical, just a quiet, stunned, disbelieving laugh that came from the same place as the crying 2 nights ago. He pulled out his phone and called Ruth. "How'd it go?" she answered. "We won, Mama." Silence. Then Ruth Reed, a woman who had buried a husband, raised 2 children alone, driven 400 miles with a packed bag and a Tupperware of fried chicken, said 5 words that broke him open all over again. "Your father is smiling, baby." Marcus leaned against the elevator wall and closed his eyes and let it all wash through him, the grief and the fear and the exhaustion, and something new underneath it all. Something green and stubborn pushing up through concrete. He drove home. When Marcus walked through his apartment door that evening, Ruth was sitting on the living room floor with Ellie building a tower out of plastic stacking cups. Ellie knocked it over every time Ruth got past 3 cups, and Ruth rebuilt it every time without complaint, laughing like it was the funniest game in the world. "There he is," Ruth said. "The man who won." "I didn't win anything yet, Mama." "The board approved a review. That's not the same as approval." "Baby, you stood up in a room full of rich people and told them the truth, and they didn't throw you out. In my book, that's a win." Ellie saw him and shrieked that full-body, arms-out, open-mouth shriek that babies do when the person they've been waiting for finally appears. Marcus dropped his laptop bag and scooped her up. She grabbed his face with both hands and pressed her mouth against his cheek, in what he'd learned to interpret as a kiss, but was really more of a wet, open-mouthed collision. "I missed you too," he said. Ruth got up from the floor, one hand on her knee. "I made dinner. Don't argue. Sit down and eat." He didn't argue. They ate at the kitchen table. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans. Real food. Not the microwaved frozen meals Marcus had been surviving on for 7 months. Ellie sat in her high chair between them, gumming a piece of soft carrot Ruth had cut for her. "Tell me about this Victoria," Ruth said. "Not the boss version. The real version." Marcus chewed slowly. "She's the hardest person to read I've ever met. She can sit in a room full of people trying to destroy her and not blink. But then she'll say something, one sentence, and it'll cut straight through everything." "What kind of something?" "Today after the meeting, she told me I gave them a reason. Not just a proposal. A reason. And the way she said it, like she'd been waiting for someone to do that and couldn't do it herself. Why couldn't she? Because she's the CEO. Everything she says gets filtered through that title. If she stands up and says, 'I'm struggling,' half the board hears she's weak, and the other half hears she's manipulating. She can't win. Sounds lonely. I think it is. I think it's been lonely for a long time." Ruth set down her fork. "This daughter she lost. You said 11 days. 11 days. Born premature. Father walked out. She was working warehouse shifts and commuting to the hospital and doing it all alone. Lord have mercy. She never told anyone. 20 years and she never told a single person at that company. She told you. She told me because I was standing in front of her screaming about my daughter, and she needed me to understand why she did what she did." Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Marcus would carry for the rest of his life. "Some people build empires because they want power, and some people build empires because they need walls. Sounds like that woman built hers to keep the grief out, and your baby girl walked right through them." Marcus stared at his mother. Ruth Reed had a 9th-grade education and the emotional intelligence of a philosopher. She saw people the way surgeons saw anatomy beneath the surface, straight to the thing that mattered. "What do I do now, Mama?" You do what she asked. You build the thing. You make it real. And you don't let that man, what's his name, Richard, you don't let him or anybody else convince you that caring about people is a weakness. It's going to be hard. Everything good is hard. Was Janine easy? He smiled. No. Janine was the most difficult woman I ever loved. And you'd do it all again. Every second. Then you already know how to do hard things, Marcus. You've been doing them your whole life. Sunday passed in a blur of phone calls and revisions. Karen sent 3 rounds of updated financials. Victoria texted twice, once to confirm the legal review timeline, and once at 11 p.m. with a message that simply read, "Thank you for the coffee. Don't forget Monday." Monday morning hit different. Marcus dropped Ellie with Ruth at 7, drove to the office, and walked in with a feeling he hadn't had in months. Purpose. Not the survival mode purpose of just getting through the day. Real purpose. The kind that makes your spine straighten and your stride lengthen without you noticing. He went straight to Victoria's office. The door was open. She was on the phone, speaking in a tone he recognized, controlled, precise, the voice she used when someone was testing her patience. She held up one finger. He waited. "Richard, I hear your concern. And I'm telling you the legal review will be completed by Wednesday. Gregory can have the full document today if he needs it. But the timeline doesn't change. We move forward, or we explain to 3,000 employees why their well-being isn't a priority. Your choice." She hung up without saying goodbye. "Good morning," Marcus said. "He's already lobbying Sandra to reconsider her vote." "Will she?" Sandra Park hasn't changed her mind about anything since 1997. She voted yes because the numbers are irrefutable, and she respects Karen's analysis more than she respects Richard's posturing. She'll hold. "And James? James called me this morning, 6:15. You know what he said?" "What?" "He said, I've been on this board for 19 years, and that young man's speech was the first honest thing I've heard in this room. He meant you." Marcus felt heat rise in his face. "I wasn't trying to make a speech. I was just telling the truth. I know. That's why it worked." She handed him a folder. Inside was a printout of the revised proposal, with Karen's budget attached, and a memo from Victoria's legal counsel outlining the implementation pathway. "This is real," Marcus said, flipping through the pages. "It's been real since Tuesday night. We're just catching up to it. What do you need from me this week?" "3 things. First, I need you to identify 10 employees across departments who would be willing to serve as pilot participants for the flex scheduling program. People who need it, not volunteers who look good on paper." "I already have a list." "Of course you do." "Second, I need you to work with facilities on the childcare space. There's a vacant office suite on the 2nd floor that was supposed to become a secondary conference center. I'm repurposing it. Richard approved that space allocation last year for the conference center. I know, and now I'm unapproving it. He'll lose his mind. Richard's mind is the least of my concerns. Third, and this is the one that matters most, I need you to talk to David Chen." Marcus paused. "David in legal?" "You mentioned him in the board meeting. His mother, the caregiver situation. He doesn't know you know, and he's going to find out when this proposal goes public. I need someone to talk to him before that happens. Someone who understands what it feels like to need help and be terrified to ask for it. That should probably come from you." "No. It should come from someone who doesn't sign his paycheck. It should come from a peer. It should come from you." Marcus looked at her. She was right. If the CEO walked into David Chen's office and said, "I know about your mother," David would hear a corporate intervention, not a conversation. But if Marcus, who'd just stood in front of the board and admitted his own struggles, if Marcus reached out, it would sound different. It would sound like what it actually was. One drowning person telling another that there's a raft. "I'll talk to him today," Marcus said. "Thank you." He turned to leave, then stopped. Victoria. The conference center space Richard specifically negotiated for that in last year's budget. Taking it away is going to feel personal to him. It is personal. Everything worth fighting for is personal. That's the part Richard has never understood. He thinks business is a machine. It's not. It's people. And people need more than conference rooms. Marcus nodded and walked out. He found David Chen in his office at 10:30. The door was closed, but not locked. Marcus knocked. A tired voice said, "Come in." David was behind his desk surrounded by case files. He was 44, lean, always put together. But today, his tie was loose, and there were circles under his eyes that looked permanent. "Marcus, what's up?" "Got a minute?" "Barely. I've got a contract review at 11, and this won't take long." Marcus closed the door and sat down. David watched him with the cautious expression of a man who'd learned to be careful about closed-door conversations. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond," Marcus said. "That's never a good opening." "I know about your mother." David's face went still. Not angry, not scared, just still, like someone had pressed pause. "I overheard you last week," Marcus continued. "In your office. You were talking to someone about her falls the home care agency dropping her burning through your PTO. You were eavesdropping. I was walking by and your voice carries when you're upset. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard." David's jaw clenched. "And you're here because what HR sent you, Victoria?" "Nobody sent me. I'm here because I stood up in front of the board on Saturday and talked about people in this building who are drowning. And I mentioned you, not by name, but the situation." David stood up. His chair rolled back and hit the wall. "You talked about my personal life in a board meeting. I talked about caregiver burnout as a systemic problem affecting this company. You're not the only one, David. You're not even close to the only one." "That's my business. That's my private—" "I know, and I'm sorry. But I'm also a single father who's been hiding a baby blanket in his filing cabinet for 3 months because I was too afraid to tell anyone I was struggling. So I know what private looks like, and I know what it costs." David stared at him. His breathing was hard like he'd been running. "What do you want from me?" David asked. "I want you to know that something is coming. Victoria is pushing through a proposal for caregiver support, flexible scheduling, mental health resources. Real support, not a pamphlet and a hotline number. And when it rolls out, I want you to use it. Not because you have to, because you deserve to. I don't need— David, your mother fell 3 times this year. You haven't taken a vacation in 2 years. You're using sick days to go to her doctor's appointments, and then working until midnight to make up the billable hours. I know because I've seen your light on at 11 p.m. from the parking garage." David sat back down slowly. He put his elbows on the desk and pressed his fingers against his temples. "She's 78, he said quietly. "She raised 4 kids by herself after my dad left, worked 2 jobs, never complained, and now she can't get from the bedroom to the bathroom without holding the wall, and I can't even be there because I'm here in this building reviewing contracts that could wait a week. I know. You don't know. You don't know what it's like to get a call from your neighbor saying your mother is on the kitchen floor and you're in a conference room pretending to care about a merger. You're right. I don't know that specifically, but I know what it's like to get a call from daycare saying your daughter has a fever of 102 and you're in a board presentation and you have to choose between your child and your career. I know what that math looks like, and the answer is always wrong no matter which way you add it." David looked at him for a long time. The kind of look that happens between 2 men when the pretending stops, and neither of them knows what comes next. "What exactly is in this proposal?" David asked. "Flexible scheduling that doesn't require manager approval. Emergency caregiver leave that doesn't come out of PTO. Partnerships with home care agencies for backup support. A dedicated liaison who helps employees navigate the system instead of forcing them to figure it out alone while doing their job." And the board approved this. They approved advancing it to formal review, 4-1. Let me guess. Richard was the one. Richard brought a lawyer. David almost smiled. Of course he did. "It's not done yet. Legal review is this week. Richard is going to push back. And when the proposal goes public, people are going to have opinions. Some good, some ugly. But it's happening, David, and I wanted you to hear it from me before you heard it from a company-wide email." David was quiet for a while. Then he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a photograph. A woman with gray hair and a wide smile standing in a garden. She looked like David around the eyes. "She planted those tomatoes herself," David said. "Last summer. Insisted on doing it alone. 2 weeks later, she fell trying to carry the watering can and broke her wrist. Sounds like my mother. She drove 400 miles with a packed suitcase and a Tupperware of fried chicken because I finally said the words, 'I need help.'" David put the photo back. "I've never said those words. Not here." "Neither had I, until last week." What changed? Marcus thought about it. About a dark office and a crying baby and a woman in a wheelchair who didn't look away. "Someone showed me what it looks like when you stop pretending." David nodded slowly. He straightened his tie, pulled his chair back to his desk. "When the proposal goes through," he said, "I want to be part of it. Whatever you need. Review implementation compliance framework. I'll draft whatever's necessary. You don't have to. I'm a lawyer, Marcus. Let me do what I'm good at. If Richard's going to fight this, you're going to need someone on the legal side who actually understands why it matters. Are you sure you'll be putting a target on yourself?" "I've had a target on myself for 2 years. The difference is, now I'd be standing next to people instead of hiding behind a closed door." Marcus reached across the desk and shook David's hand. David's grip was firm, the handshake of a man who'd just made a decision he should have made a long time ago. "One more thing," Marcus said at the door. "Take tomorrow off. Go see your mother. I have a contract review at... I'll handle Tom. He owes me about 16 favors. Go see your mother, David." David looked at the photograph in his drawer, then back at Marcus. "Yeah," he said. "Okay." Marcus walked back to his desk, feeling something he couldn't quite name. Not pride exactly. Something older. Something that felt like the first time Janine ever held his hand. That shock of realizing you don't have to carry everything alone, and the world doesn't end when you admit it. His phone buzzed. Victoria. How did it go with David? He's in. And he's taking tomorrow off to see his mother. A long pause. Then, good. That might be the most important thing we've done all week. More important than the board vote. Board votes change policies, Marcus. What you just did changes a person. There's a difference. He read the message 3 times. Then he put his phone away and opened his laptop and got to work. By Wednesday, the legal review was complete. Gregory Wells. Richard's own counsel had gone through the proposal line by line and found nothing actionable. No liability exposure, no regulatory conflicts, no grounds for objection. Richard called an emergency phone conference with the board that evening. Marcus wasn't on the call, but Karen texted him a play-by-play. Richard arguing implementation costs are underestimated. Karen destroying him with data. Sandra asking why he's wasting everyone's time. James silent. Victoria letting him talk himself into a corner. Then 20 minutes later, vote to proceed with full implementation. 4-1. Same as Saturday. Richard voted no. Nobody cared. Marcus sat at his kitchen table reading Karen's texts while Ruth gave Ellie a bath in the next room. He could hear his mother singing something old, something from church, the same melody Ruth had sung to him when he was small and scared. He put his phone down and walked to the bathroom doorway. Ellie was splashing in the little plastic tub, slapping the water with both hands, delighted by the chaos she was creating. Ruth was kneeling beside her, one hand supporting Ellie's back, the other wiping soap from her forehead. "Mama." It passed, the whole thing, full implementation. Ruth didn't look up from the baby, but her hand stopped moving for just a second, and when she spoke, her voice had that thickness that came right before tears, the thickness she'd had at his father's funeral, and at Janine's funeral, and at Ellie's birth, when she held her granddaughter for the first time, and whispered, "There you are. Your daddy always said the world doesn't change in big speeches. It changes in the small rooms where one person finally tells the truth. I don't think Daddy ever said that. Fine, I said it. But it sounds better if I give him credit. He needs the wins. He's dead. Marcus laughed, a real deep laugh that came from his belly and filled the bathroom, and made Ellie look up at him with wide eyes, and then start laughing too, because babies laugh when the people they love laugh, even when they don't understand why. Ruth reached up and squeezed his hand. Her fingers were wet and soapy and warm. I'm proud of you, son. I know, Mama. Now go finish your work. I've got a baby to wrangle and she's trying to eat the soap again. He went back to the kitchen table. He opened his laptop. He had 14 new emails, implementation timelines, facility assessments, vendor contacts for the childcare partnerships. 14 emails that represented a future different from the one he'd been living in for 7 months. He started answering them one by one, while his mother sang in the other room and his daughter splashed in the water, and somewhere across town, Victoria Hale sat in her own kitchen, reading the same emails, making the same plans, carrying the same fragile, stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd built something that would hold. 3 months passed. Not the slow, grinding kind of months Marcus had lived through after Janine died, the kind where every hour felt like wading through wet concrete. These months moved differently. They had rhythm, they had purpose. They had the kind of forward motion that happens when people stop surviving and start building. The childcare center opened on a Tuesday in March, 2nd floor East Wing. What had been Richard Thornton's prized conference center expansion was now a bright licensed facility with room for 32 children under the age of 5. Marcus had overseen the build-out himself, not because Victoria asked him to, but because every time he walked past the construction and saw the small chairs being carried in and the cribs being assembled, something in his chest pulled tight and he needed to be close to it. Ellie was the first child enrolled. Ruth had stayed for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of pot roast and unsolicited advice, and the kind of steady, unshakable love that only a grandmother can provide. But eventually she'd gone back to Greensboro, and Marcus had to face the morning routine alone again. Except it wasn't the same. He dropped Ellie off at 7:15 every morning 2 floors below his office. He could check the center's live feed from his laptop. He could walk downstairs during lunch and hold her for 10 minutes and walk back up and finish his day without the gnawing fear that had lived in his stomach for months, the fear that something would go wrong and he'd be too far away to fix it. The flex scheduling program launched the same week. 47 employees enrolled in the first round. Not just parents, caregivers of all kinds, people taking care of aging parents, siblings with disabilities, spouses recovering from surgery. David Chen was one of the first. He restructured his hours so he could spend Tuesday and Thursday mornings with his mother handling her medical appointments and physical therapy without burning through PTO or lying on his timesheet. David's mother fell one more time in April, a minor stumble in the garden. But this time, David was there. He caught her arm before she hit the ground. She looked at him and said, "Why are you home on a Tuesday?" And he said, "Because my company finally figured out that I have a life outside the office." She laughed and told him to help her water the tomatoes. He told Marcus that story in the break room the next day, both of them standing by the coffee machine, talking the way men talk when they've been through something together, casual on the surface, everything that matters underneath. "She's doing better," David said. "The new home care agency Victoria's team connected us with, they're actually good. They show up. They stay. My mother calls the morning aide her friend. She's never called anyone that." "I'm glad, David." "Listen, I want to tell you something." David set his coffee down. "When you came to my office that day and told me you knew I almost threw you out, I had my hand on the phone ready to call HR and file a complaint. I know, I saw your hand move. But you didn't flinch. You just sat there and told me the truth. And it made me realize that I'd been treating my own situation like a secret, like something shameful. My mother needs help. I need help taking care of her. That's not shameful. That's just life." "That's just life." "Yeah, so, thank you." Marcus nodded. They stood there for a second, two men who didn't need to say anything else, and then David picked up his coffee and went back to work. The mental health component rolled out in May. Not the old EAP hotline that nobody used, the one where you called a 1-800 number and got transferred 3 times and then talked to a stranger in a call center who asked you to rate your distress on a scale of 1 to 10. This was different. Victoria had brought in 2 licensed counselors who held office hours on the 7th floor 3 days a week. Walk in. No appointment necessary. No paperwork that went into your personnel file. The first week 4 people used it. The second week 11. By the 3rd week, the counselors asked for a 3rd day, and Victoria approved it in under an hour. Marcus went once. He didn't tell anyone. He sat in the small, quiet room on the 7th floor and talked to a woman named Dr. Elaine Foster about Janine. About the morning he woke up and she was already gone, already on the floor in the bathroom, already past the point where calling 911 could matter. About the sound the paramedics made when they stopped working on her. That specific, terrible exhale. About picking up Ellie from the crib 20 minutes later and holding her against his chest and realizing that he was now the only wall between his daughter and the world. He talked for 50 minutes. He cried for about 10 of those minutes. He walked out feeling lighter, not healed, not fixed, just lighter. Like someone had taken a single brick out of the wall he'd been carrying on his back. He went back twice more in June. Victoria never asked him about it. But one afternoon in early July, as they were reviewing the quarterly impact report together, she said something that made him look up. "I went this morning." "Went where?" "7th floor." He didn't say anything. He waited. "First time I've talked to anyone about the accident," she said. "Not the company narrative, not the press statement, the real version. The one where I was driving home from a board dinner and a truck ran a red light, and I woke up 3 days later and couldn't feel my legs, and the first thing I asked was whether I could still run my company. Not whether I'd walk again, whether I could work." She paused. Dr. Foster said that was worth examining. And she's right. I built this company into my spine because the real one doesn't work anymore, and I'm not sure that's healthy. But I'm also not sure I know how to be anyone else. You don't have to be anyone else, Victoria. You just have to let the person you already are take up more space. She looked at him with an expression he'd only seen once before that night in her office when Ellie's hand was wrapped around her thumb. Open. Unguarded. The face behind the face. "When did you get wise?" she asked. "I'm not wise. I'm tired. Tired people stop filtering." Maybe that's the same thing. The impact numbers came in at the end of the 2nd quarter. Karen presented them to the full board, and this time Marcus was in the room not as a guest, not as a special exception. Victoria had created a new position, Director of Employee Experience and Well-Being. Marcus had tried to turn it down. "I'm operations," he'd said. "I move freight." "You moved an entire company, Marcus. The freight can wait." He took the job. Karen's numbers were staggering. Employee turnover had dropped 41% in the 1st quarter since the programs launched. Recruitment costs were down by $600,000. Productivity metrics, the ones that actually measured output, not just hours logged, were up across every department that participated in the flex scheduling pilot. Exit interviews, which had previously cited work-life balance as the #1 reason for leaving, now showed the lowest dissatisfaction scores in 5 years. James Whitfield read the report and said, "I've been on boards for 3 decades. I've never seen a human capital investment yield returns this clean." Sandra Park said, "The data speaks for itself." Richard Thornton said nothing. He sat through the entire presentation with his arms crossed and his jaw tight, and when the vote came to make the programs permanent, he raised his hand with everyone else. 5-0. Marcus looked at Victoria. She was watching Richard's hand go up with an expression that wasn't triumph. It was something quieter. Something like relief. After the meeting, Richard stopped Marcus in the hallway. It was the first time the two of them had been alone since that Saturday boardroom confrontation 3 months ago. "Mr. Reed. Mr. Thornton." Richard stood there for a moment, arms at his sides. He looked older than he had 3 months ago, not diminished, just tired in a way that power couldn't hide. "My son called me last week," Richard said. "We haven't spoken in 2 years. He lives in Portland. He has a daughter I've never met. She's 4. Marcus said nothing. "He called because someone in his company, some tech startup, implemented a caregiver support program, flexible hours, counseling, the whole thing. He said it changed his life. He said it made him think about what he wished his father had done differently." Richard's voice was steady, but something underneath it wasn't. "He asked me to come visit. He said his daughter should know her grandfather. Are you going to go?" "I bought the ticket last night." Marcus let that sit. He didn't gloat. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just stood in the hallway with a man who'd fought him 3 months ago and was now standing in front of him with something that looked a lot like gratitude dressed up as information. "I don't agree with how this was done," Richard said. "The process was irregular. The board should have been consulted earlier. And I still believe there are governance concerns that—" "Richard." "What, go see your granddaughter?" Richard stared at him. Then something shifted in his face, the barest crack in the armor, the smallest possible acknowledgement that the world had changed, and he was trying to catch up. "I will," he said, and walked away. Marcus watched him go. He thought about what Victoria had said months ago, that Richard believed leadership meant control, that strength meant never needing anything from anyone. Maybe Richard was learning something different. Maybe it was too late. Maybe it wasn't. Marcus didn't get to decide that. Nobody did. People arrived at their own truths on their own timelines, and all you could do was leave the door open. Late July. A Friday afternoon. Marcus was packing up his desk. The new desk, the bigger one Victoria had promised, in the new office next to the childcare center when his phone rang. "Marcus, it's Diane. She wants to see you. Now." "Everything okay? Just come." He took the elevator to 14. Victoria's door was open. She was in her chair by the window, laptop closed for once, hands resting in her lap. "Close the door," she said. He did. "Sit down." He sat. "I got a letter today," she said. "From a woman in Trenton." Marcus felt the air change. "Her name is Patricia Colson. She was a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital 20 years ago. She was in the NICU. She was there when—" Victoria stopped, took a breath, started again. "She was there when my daughter died." Marcus didn't move. "She wrote to tell me that she's retiring next month, and that she's spent the last 20 years thinking about a young woman who came to the hospital every night after working double shifts and sat beside an incubator and sang to a baby who couldn't breathe on her own. She said she never forgot. She said she wanted me to know that my daughter was never alone. That on the nights I couldn't be there, the nights I had to work, or the nights they told me to go home and rest, Patricia sat with her. She held her hand through the incubator ports. She talked to her. Victoria's voice broke. Marcus had seen this woman face down a hostile board. He'd seen her negotiate million-dollar deals without blinking. He'd seen her wheel herself through a building full of people who underestimated her every single day and never once show a crack. She was cracking now. "She sent a photograph," Victoria whispered. "I didn't know one existed. The hospital took it. Patricia kept a copy all these years." She held up a small printed photograph. A tiny baby in an incubator, wires and tubes everywhere, and a young woman's hand reaching through the port, pinky finger extended, touching the baby's palm. "That's my hand," Victoria said. "I was 26. I was terrified." "Victoria." "My daughter's name was Grace." It was the first time she'd said the name out loud in 20 years. Marcus could tell by the way her mouth shaped it carefully, like handling something made of glass. "Grace," he repeated. "I never named her publicly. The death certificate just says baby girl Hale. But I named her. In the NICU on the second night when the doctor told me she probably wouldn't make it, I leaned into the incubator and I said, "Your name is Grace, and even if you only get 11 days, you will have a name." Marcus reached across and took her hand. Her fingers were cold and thin and scarred from the accident, and strong in a way that had nothing to do with grip. "She would be 20 years old," Victoria said. "I know. She'd be in college, or traveling, or making terrible decisions that I'd lose sleep over. Probably all three." Victoria laughed. Wet, broken, real. The kind of laugh that sits right next to grief and doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. "I'm going to write Patricia back," she said. "And I'm going to visit Trenton, the hospital, the cemetery where Grace is buried. I haven't been there in 15 years. Do you want me to come with you?" She looked at him. "You do that. Victoria, you held my daughter in a dark building when she was crying, and you were the only one there. You think I wouldn't drive you to Trenton?" She squeezed his hand. One squeeze. Firm and final like a period at the end of a sentence. "I'd like that," she said. "Then we'll go." He didn't leave right away. They sat together for a while in the quiet of the 14th floor, the city doing its thing outside the windows, the building humming around them like a living thing. Eventually, Victoria said, "I want to name the child care center." "It doesn't have a name." "It's been called the second floor facility on every piece of paperwork. That's not a name. That's a location." "What do you want to call it?" She didn't answer right away. She looked at the photograph in her lap, the tiny hand, the incubator. 20 years of silence. "The Grace Center," she said. Marcus nodded. "The Grace Center. I'll need to tell the company why." "You will." "I'm not sure I can do that. 3 months ago, I wasn't sure I could stand in front of a boardroom and tell them I was drowning. And then I did. And the world didn't end. It just got bigger." "When did you become the one giving me advice?" "Somewhere around the second cup of black coffee." She smiled. A real smile. The kind that uses every muscle in the face and doesn't apologize for existing. Marcus left her office at 5:30. He took the elevator to the second floor, walked into the childcare center, and picked up Ellie. She was sitting in a little bouncer chewing on the same rubber giraffe she'd had since birth, looking at him with Janine's eyes and his mother's stubbornness. He held her against his chest. She grabbed his ear. He let her. "Hey, baby girl," he said. "Guess what? The place where you spend your days is getting a name. A real one." She blew a spit bubble. "It's called the Grace Center, named after a little girl who only got 11 days but changed everything." Ellie looked at him like she understood. She probably didn't. But babies have a way of being present in moments that adults overcomplicate, and right then, in that room full of small chairs and soft light and the sounds of other people's children laughing, Marcus felt something settle inside him. Not the absence of grief. Grief was still there. It would always be there for Janine, for the life they'd planned, for every milestone Ellie would hit without her mother watching. But the grief had company now. It shared space with something else. Connection, purpose. The stubborn belief that people could be better if someone was brave enough to go first. He strapped Ellie into her car seat and drove home. Rush hour traffic, windows down. A summer evening doing what summer evenings do. His phone sat on the passenger seat. A text from Ruth. "Call me when you get home. Made a new pot roast recipe. Need your opinion." A text from Karen Q. 3 projections look even better. Richard requested a copy. "I think he's actually reading them now." A text from David. "Mom wants to meet you. She says anyone who helped her son stop being an idiot deserves a home-cooked meal." Saturday, and a text from Victoria sent 2 minutes ago. "I just told Diane about Grace. She cried. Then she said, 'I knew there was a reason I bet $50 on you.' I think that's the highest compliment she's ever given." Marcus put the phone down and looked at Ellie in the rearview mirror. She was falling asleep. her head tilting sideways, mouth open, one hand still clutching the rubber giraffe. 7 months ago, he'd stood in a cemetery holding this baby and believed he was alone. He'd believed that strength meant silence, that asking for help meant failure, that the weight on his shoulders was his to carry until it crushed him. He'd been wrong about all of it. Strength wasn't silence. It was Marcus standing in a boardroom with shaking hands telling the truth. It was Victoria wheeling herself toward a crying baby in a dark building because something inside her refused to look away. It was Ruth driving 400 miles with a packed bag. It was David Chen catching his mother's arm before she hit the ground. It was Richard Thornton buying a plane ticket to Portland to meet a granddaughter he'd never held. Strength was every single person who'd stopped pretending they didn't need anyone and let someone in. Marcus pulled into his parking spot. He turned off the engine. Ellie was fully asleep now, breathing soft and steady, dreaming about whatever babies dream about. He sat there for 1 minute. Just one, letting the quiet fill the car, letting the day finish itself. Then he unbuckled his daughter, lifted her against his chest, grabbed the diaper bag, and walked inside. The apartment smelled like the lavender diffuser Ruth had left behind. Ellie's crib was ready. The kitchen table still had his laptop on it, open to an email from Victoria with the subject line, Phase 4 National Rollout Proposal. There was more work to do. There would always be more work to do. But tonight, Marcus Reed laid his daughter down, pulled the yellow duck blanket up to her chin, and stood in the doorway listening to her breathe. And for the first time since Janine died, he didn't feel like he was holding on. He felt like he was standing up,